Have you ever made a mistake so big you were sure it was the last thing you'd ever do? Meet Charlotte Mitchell. She was invisible, a broke, desperate hotel maid trying to survive in New York City. Then came the night she broke every rule. She walked into the wrong room, saw the most dangerous man in the city dying, and did the unthinkable. She punched a Mafia don in the gut. Most people would be buried for touching Damien Valenti. But what happened next wasn't a funeral. It was a proposal. This is the true, twisted story of how one violent act turned a maid into a target, a prisoner, and finally, a legend. You won't believe the secret she uncovered inside the Valenti mansion. New York City doesn't care if you're drowning. It just pours more rain on you. No one knew this better than Charlotte Mitchell. At 24, Charlotte wasn't living. She was surviving, and barely. Her phone was a ticking time bomb of debt collector notifications. Her apartment was a shoebox in Queens with a radiator that hissed but never heated, and her job at the Sterling Hotel was the only thread keeping her from homelessness. The Sterling was old money. It smelled of mahogany, beeswax, and secrets. Charlotte was invisible there, a ghost in a grey uniform pushing a cart filled with fresh towels and tiny soaps. That was how she liked it. Invisibility was safe. But on a rainy Tuesday in November, safety evaporated. Mitchell, the floor manager, a sharp-faced woman named Mrs. Higgins, snapped her fingers. Suite 604, now. The guest requested a turn-down service, but the regular girl called out sick. You're up. Charlotte froze. Suite 604 wasn't just a room. It was the presidential suite. It had been booked out for the last 3 weeks by a guest who never used the lobby, never ordered room service, and had private security stationed at the elevator. Mrs. Higgins, I'm not cleared for the VIP floor, Charlotte stammered, gripping the handle of her cart. You are today. And listen to me. Higgins leaned in, her voice dropping to a whisper. Do not speak unless spoken to. Do not look the guest in the eye. Get in, clean, get out. If you mess this up, don't bother coming back. Charlotte nodded, her stomach twisting into knots. She needed this paycheck. Her brother, Toby, needed insulin, and the pharmacy had stopped accepting her IOUs. She took the service elevator up, the metal box rattling as it climbed towards the skyline. When the doors opened on the 60th floor, the hallway was silent. Unnervingly so. Usually, 2 large men in suits stood by the double doors of 604. Today, the hall was empty. Strange, Charlotte thought. Maybe they're on a break. She swiped her keycard. The light blinked green. She pushed the heavy door open and announced herself softly. Housekeeping. No answer. The suite was massive, a sprawling landscape of velvet furniture and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. It was dim, lit only by the city glow and a few amber lamps. Charlotte parked her cart by the door and stepped onto the plush carpet. Hello? Housekeeping? Silence. She moved towards the bedroom to check the linens, but as she passed the living area, a sound stopped her. It was a wet, strangled gasp. Charlotte turned. In the center of the room, a man was slumped in a high-backed leather armchair. He was dressed in a suit that probably cost more than Charlotte would earn in a lifetime, charcoal grey, bespoke, immaculate, but the man himself was a wreck. His skin was a terrifying shade of grey. His hands were clawing at his throat, tearing at his silk tie. A crystal glass lay shattered on the floor, a dark, amber liquid pooling into the cream carpet. Charlotte's instinct was to run. This was clearly the VIP. This was Damien Valenti. Everyone in New York knew the name, even if they'd never seen the face. The Valenti family ran the unions, the docks, and half the politicians in the state. If he was dying, being in the room was a death sentence for a witness. Run, her brain screamed. Leave now and pretend you were never here. But then the man's eyes met hers. They were dark, almost black, and filled with a terrifying, primal panic. He wasn't breathing. Charlotte didn't think. She didn't calculate the risk. She just saw a dying man. She dropped her duster and sprinted across the room. "Sir, can you hear me?" Damien Valenti couldn't speak. His airway was completely obstructed. But it wasn't food. There was no dinner plate. It was the drink. His throat was swelling shut. Anaphylaxis? Poison? He tried to stand, stumbling forward, grabbing Charlotte's shoulders with a grip like iron. He was heavy, massive, towering over her small frame even as he collapsed. He fell to his knees, dragging her down with him. His lips were turning blue. He's not choking on an object, Charlotte realized, her mind racing back to a first aid course she'd taken years ago for a babysitting job. His throat is closing up, but he's still trying to inhale. He needed air, and he needed it 10 seconds ago. Charlotte tried to position herself behind him for the Heimlich, just in case, but he was too big, and he was dead weight. He slumped backward against the coffee table, his head lolling. "Wake up!" Charlotte screamed. She slapped his face. Nothing. His chest wasn't moving. If his heart stopped, it was game over. She saw a faint movement in his chest, a spasm. He was trying to cough, trying to expel something, but the muscles were paralyzed. He needed a shock to the system, a violent reboot. Charlotte straddled his hips, ignoring the absurdity of sitting on top of a Mafia don. She made a fist. She wasn't a fighter. She was a maid who scrubbed floors and lifted heavy mattresses. She had grip strength. "Forgive me," she whispered. She reared back and drove her fist as hard as she could into his solar plexus, right below the sternum. Thud. It was a sickening sound. Damien's body jolted off the floor. His eyes bulged. Nothing happened. "Breathe, damn you!" Charlotte yelled, panic rising in her throat. She pulled back and struck him again, harder this time, putting her entire body weight behind the punch. Wham! Suddenly Damien Valenti convulsed. He leaned forward and retched violently. A mixture of bile and the amber liquid expelled onto the expensive carpet. He gasped, a ragged, desperate intake of air that sounded like a saw cutting through wood. He coughed, sputtering, his hands flying to his chest. He was breathing. Charlotte scrambled back, breathless, her hand throbbing from the impact. She sat on her heels, watching him. He was on his hands and knees, heaving, the color slowly returning to his face. For a moment, the only sound was his labored breathing and the rain against the window. Charlotte realized with dawning horror what she had just done. She had just assaulted the head of the Valenti crime family. She was sitting on the floor of the presidential suite with a bruised hand and a vomit-stained billionaire. She stood up, her legs shaking. I should go. I'll call the paramedics." She turned towards the door. Click, the sound of a safety being disengaged echoed through the room. It came from the hallway door. The double doors burst open. 3 men in dark suits stormed in. They didn't look like hotel security. They looked like predators. They saw the shattered glass. They saw their boss on the floor, wiping his mouth. And they saw Charlotte, standing over him, looking guilty as sin. "Boss!" the lead man shouted, raising a handgun and pointing it directly at Charlotte's forehead. "Don't move!" he roared at her. "Get on the ground, now!" Charlotte threw her hands up, tears springing to her eyes. "I helped him. I swear I was helping him." "On the ground." The man advanced, the barrel of the gun looking like a cannon. Damien Valenti let out a low growl from the floor. He held up one hand, palm out. "Wait," Damien rasped. His voice was ruined, gravelly and harsh. The gunman hesitated, his finger still on the trigger. "She hit you, boss. We heard the thump. She's an assassin." "I'm a maid," Charlotte cried, her voice cracking. Damien slowly pushed himself up. He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, his dark eyes locking onto Charlotte. There was no gratitude in them yet, only calculation, a cold, predatory assessment. He stood up, swaying slightly, but regaining his composure with terrifying speed. He looked at the mess on the floor, then at Charlotte's trembling form, and finally at her name tag. Mitchell. Bruno, Damien said, his voice barely a whisper but commanding total silence. "Lower the gun." "But boss," I said, "lower it." Bruno lowered the weapon but kept his eyes on Charlotte. Damien took a step toward her. Charlotte wanted to retreat, but her back hit the wall. He loomed over her, smelling of expensive cologne and the acrid scent of sickness. He looked at her hand. Her knuckles were red and already swelling. He reached out and took her hand. Charlotte flinched, expecting him to crush it. Instead, he lifted it to eye level, inspecting the bruise. "You have a hell of a right hook, Miss Mitchell," he rasped. I thought you were dying," she whispered. "I was," Damien said. He dropped her hand and turned to Bruno. "Check the drink. It was the scotch. Someone spiked the bottle." Bruno's face went pale. "The seal was broken?" "It is now," Damien said. He turned back to Charlotte. "You saved my life. But now you have a problem." Charlotte blinked, confusion warring with fear. "Problem? I can just leave. I won't tell anyone." Damien shook his head slowly. A dark, humorless smile touched his lips. "You touched me. You saw me weak. You know someone tried to kill me." He stepped closer, boxing her in. "In my world, Charlotte, that makes you a loose end. And we usually cut loose ends." Charlotte stopped breathing. "However," Damien continued, his gaze dropping to her worn-out shoes, "I find myself in need of someone with your unique skill set. Someone who acts first and panics later." He reached into his jacket pocket. Charlotte flinched again, expecting a weapon. He pulled out a sleek black phone and dialed a number. "Bring the car around," he said into the phone, "and pack a bag for Miss Mitchell." "What?" Charlotte gasped. "No, I can't go with you. My job. My brother." Damien hung up and looked at her. "Your job is gone. You assaulted a guest. As for your brother—" "Toby, is it?" Charlotte's blood ran cold. "How do you know his name?" "I know everything that happens in this building," Damien said. "You have debts, Charlotte. Big ones. Come with me, and they disappear. Walk out that door, and you're on your own with the police, the hotel, and whoever tried to poison me, who will definitely come looking for the witness." He extended a hand. It wasn't an offer. It was a command disguised as a choice. "So, Charlotte, do you want to be a maid who goes to prison? Or do you want to be the woman who owns the man who owns the city?" The ride to the Valenti estate was silent, a silence that felt heavier than the bulletproof glass separating Charlotte from the rainy New York streets. She sat in the back of the black SUV, gripping her knees. Her knuckles were turning a deep, angry purple, a souvenir from punching the most powerful man in the city. Damien Valenti sat opposite her, reading files on a tablet. He had changed his shirt in the car, swapping the vomit-stained silk for a crisp white dress shirt he'd pulled from a hidden compartment. He looked immaculate again, like the near-death experience in Suite 604 had never happened. But Charlotte noticed his hand trembled slightly when he reached for his water. "Where are we going?" Charlotte asked, her voice small. Damien didn't look up. "Long Island, the North Shore." "And my brother?" "Toby?" "Bruno has already dispatched a team to your apartment," Damien said, swiping a finger across the screen. "They will collect his medication and transfer him to St. Jude's private wing. It's the best facility in the state. He'll have round-the-clock care." Charlotte's heart hammered against her ribs. St. Jude's cost thousands a night. "I can't pay for that." Damien finally looked up. His eyes were cold, hard, flint. "I didn't ask you to pay. I bought your debt, Charlotte. You belong to the Valenti estate now. Consider it employment." "Doing what?" "Cleaning? Surviving," he said darkly. "You are the only person in my circle who didn't hesitate to save me. My own guards waited for orders. You just acted. That makes you valuable, and it makes you dangerous to anyone who wants me dead." The car turned off the highway and onto a winding private road. Massive iron gates swung open. revealing a driveway lined with ancient oaks that looked like skeletal fingers in the headlights. The mansion at the end was a fortress of stone and glass, beautiful but imposing. It didn't look like a home. It looked like a mausoleum. When the car stopped, Bruno opened the door. Out. Charlotte stepped onto the gravel. The air smelled of salt water and money. A woman was waiting on the steps. Tall, severe, with hair pulled back so tight it looked painful. "This is Mrs. Caldwell," Damien said, stepping out behind Charlotte. "She runs the house. Mrs. Caldwell. This is Charlotte. She will be staying in the East Wing." Mrs. Caldwell's eyes narrowed as she scanned Charlotte's cheap uniform and messy hair. "The East Wing, sir? That's the family corridor." "I am aware of the geography of my own house," Damien snapped. "She stays next to my quarters." "And Caldwell? She prepares my meals from now on. No one else touches my food. Not the chef, not the sous chefs, not you. Only her." Charlotte's jaw dropped. "I can't cook. I make grilled cheese and instant noodles." Damien leaned in close, his voice dropping so only she could hear. "I don't need a chef, Charlotte. I can hire a Michelin star cook to boil water. I need a taster. I need someone who inspects the ingredients, someone who watches the kitchen staff. Because if I die, the money for your brother's hospital bills stops. Do you understand the incentive?" The weight of it crashed down on her. He was tying his life to hers. If he died, Toby died. "I understand," she whispered. "Good, Caldwell, get her out of those rags. Burn them. Get her something decent." Damien swept past them into the house without looking back. The next 2 weeks were a blur of terror and luxury. Charlotte was scrubbed, measured, and dressed in clothes that cost more than her rent. Cashmere sweaters, tailored trousers, silk blouses. She felt like a doll being dressed up for a play she didn't know the lines to. She quickly learned that the Valenti estate was a nest of vipers. The staff were polite, but cold. They knew she wasn't a mistress. Damien never touched her, never even invited her into his room except to check his food. But they didn't know what she was, that mystery-bred resentment. But the real danger wasn't the staff. It was the family. On her 3rd Friday, the estate hosted a business dinner. That was the euphemism. In reality, it was a summit of the 5 syndicate heads of the tri-state area. Charlotte was in the kitchen, watching the head chef, a temperamental Frenchman named Jean-Luc, prepare a veal marsala. Her job was tedious but terrifying. She had to watch every pinch of salt, every pour of wine. "You hover like a vulture, girl," Jean-Luc spat, whisking a sauce. "Just doing my job, chef," Charlotte said, her eyes fixed on his hands. "The boss is paranoid," a smooth voice came from the doorway. Charlotte turned. Leaning against the doorframe was a man who looked like a younger, sharper version of Damien. He had the same dark hair, but his eyes were lighter, almost hazel, and his smile didn't reach them. "You must be the stray cat Damien picked up," the man said, walking into the kitchen. The kitchen staff immediately went silent and looked down. "I'm Charlotte." "I know, I'm Stefano, Damien's cousin." He reached out and picked up a grape from a fruit platter. He tossed it into his mouth. "I hear you punched him. Is that true?" Charlotte stiffened. "I was helping him." Stefano chuckled. "Of course. Anaphylaxis, a peanut allergy, they said. Strange, though. Damien has never been allergic to peanuts before. Sudden onset adult allergies are rare." He was fishing. He wanted to know if she knew it was poison. "I wouldn't know, sir. I'm just the maid." Stefano stepped closer, invading her personal space. He smelled of whiskey and gunpowder. "You're not a maid anymore, Charlotte. You're the gatekeeper, and gatekeepers have a nasty habit of getting their fingers caught in the door." He reached for the wine bottle Jean-Luc was about to use for the sauce. "Let me taste the vintage, for quality control." "No!" Charlotte's hand shot out, grabbing the bottleneck before he could touch it. The room went dead silent. Jean-Luc gasped. "You did not touch a Valenti." Stefano looked at her hand on the bottle, then up at her face. His smile vanished. "You have spirit. Damien always liked wild things. Just be careful, Charlotte. Wild things usually end up in cages or on walls. He turned and walked out. Charlotte's heart was pounding so hard she felt dizzy. She looked at the wine bottle. She uncorked it and poured a tiny amount into a spoon. She swallowed it. She'd waited 5 minutes. 10. Nothing happened. It wasn't poisoned. But Stefano's message was clear. I am watching you. When she brought the platter out to the dining room, the air was thick with cigar smoke and tension. Damien sat at the head of the table, looking like a king on a throne of knives. When Charlotte placed the plate in front of him, he didn't look at her, but his hand brushed hers for a fraction of a second. It was a signal. Is it safe? She tapped the table once with her index finger. Yes. Damien picked up his fork and ate. For the first time since she arrived, Charlotte felt a strange surge of pride. She was keeping him alive. But as she retreated to the corner to wait, she caught Stefano staring at her from across the table. He raised his glass in a mock toast. Charlotte realized then that the punch in the hotel room was the easy part. The fight had just begun. Living with Damien Valenti was like living with a thunderstorm. Most of the time he was distant, a low rumble of thunder on the horizon, shut away in his study, taking calls in Italian, reviewing ledgers that Charlotte wasn't allowed to see. But sometimes the storm broke. It happened late one Tuesday night. The house was asleep. The only light came from the security floods outside. Charlotte couldn't sleep. She was worrying about Toby. She had visited him earlier that day. He looked better, his color returning, but he kept asking why she had fancy guards outside his room. She had lied, telling him she got a job with a celebrity. She went down to the kitchen to get warm milk, a habit from her childhood. As she passed the library, she heard a crash. Not a clumsy stumble, but the sound of something heavy being thrown. Charlotte froze. Protocols said she should call Bruno, but curiosity, the same instinct that made her enter suite 604, pulled her toward the heavy oak doors. She pushed one open a crack. Damien was there. He wasn't wearing his suit armor. He was in slacks and a white undershirt, his feet bare. The room was a wreck. A lamp was shattered on the floor. Books were swept off the desk. He was pacing, dragging his hands through his hair, muttering to himself, "Where is it? Where is the leak?" He looked unhinged, desperate. Charlotte stepped inside. "Mr. Valenti?" Damien spun around. In his hand, he held a heavy crystal decanter, raised as a weapon. When he saw it was her, he didn't lower it immediately. His chest was heaving. "I told you," he snarled, "never to come in here unannounced. I heard a crash. I thought you were hurt. I'm not hurt. I'm blind." He slammed the decanter down on the desk, luckily not breaking it. "Someone is bleeding my accounts. 3 shipments seized by the feds in 2 weeks. Someone on the inside is talking, and I can't find the rat." He slumped into his chair, burying his face in his hands. It was the first time she had seen him look defeated. He wasn't the Mafia Don in that moment. He was just a man drowning in betrayal. Charlotte approached slowly. She saw the papers scattered on the floor. They were shipping manifests. Is it Stefano?" she asked softly. Damien looked up, his eyes bloodshot. "Stefano is ambitious. He's arrogant. But he's blood. In our world, you don't turn on blood unless you want a war that burns everything down. If I accuse him without proof, the family's split. Half go with him, half with me. It would be a massacre." "Sometimes," Charlotte said, picking up a spilled book, "people closest to you think they know better than you. They don't think they're betraying you. They think they're saving the empire from you." Damien looked at her, really looked at her. The anger faded, replaced by a weary curiosity. "You sound like you speak from experience." "My father," Charlotte said, placing the book on the desk. "He gambled away our house. He told us he did it to double our money and buy us a mansion. He thought he was the hero, until the day he lost everything. Damien let out a dry, bitter laugh. So I'm the gambler? No. You're the house holding the deed. But someone thinks they can run the house better. Damien stood up. He walked around the desk until he was standing inches from her. The air in the room shifted. It became charged, electric. You have a way of seeing things clearly, Charlotte. Maybe because you're not one of us. He reached out and touched a stray lock of hair falling over her forehead. His fingers were rough, calloused, but his touch was surprisingly gentle. Charlotte stopped breathing. She knew she should pull away. He was a killer. He was a criminal. But he was also the man who saved her brother. "Why do you trust me?" she whispered. "Because you have nothing to gain by my death," Damien murmured, his thumb brushing her cheekbone. "And because you're the only real thing in this entire God-forsaken house." He leaned in. Charlotte's eyes fluttered shut. She wanted him to kiss her. It was insane. It was wrong. But she wanted it. Bzzzt! The intercom on his desk buzzed loudly. Damien pulled back instantly, the mask of the Don sliding back into place. He hit the button. "What?" "Sir," Bruno's voice crackled. "We have a situation at the docks, the warehouse fire. It wasn't an accident." Damien's jaw tightened. "I'm coming." He looked at Charlotte. The moment was gone, shattered by the reality of his life. "Go to bed, Charlotte. Lock your door." The next day, the tension in the house was palpable. Damien was gone before dawn. Charlotte spent the day anxiously pacing the kitchen, driving Jean-Luc crazy. In the afternoon, Mrs. Caldwell found her. "Mr. Valenti requires your presence. Upstairs, the master suite." Charlotte hurried up the grand staircase. She found Damien in his dressing room. He was standing in front of a mirror, buttoning a tuxedo shirt. He had a bandage on his left forearm, a fresh injury. "You're hurt," Charlotte said, rushing forward. "A scratch," Damien said, waving her off. "Tonight is the governor's charity gala. The entire city will be there. Politicians, police captains, and my enemies." "Why are you telling me?" "Because you're coming with me." Charlotte froze. "Me? I'm the maid." "Not tonight. Tonight, you are my date." Damien turned to face her. "I need eyes, Charlotte. Everyone knows my men. They know Bruno. They know Stefano. They know who to hide from. But no one knows you. They will look right past you. You see things like you saw me choking when my guards saw nothing." "You want me to spy?" "I want you to listen. Women talk when they think no one important is listening. The wives, the girlfriends, they know secrets. I need to know who is moving against me." He gestured to the bed. Laid out on the silk comforter was a dress. It was emerald green velvet, floor length with a slit up the thigh. Beside it lay a diamond necklace that looked heavy enough to anchor a boat. "Put it on," Damien commanded. "Tonight, you are not Charlotte the maid. You are Charlotte Mitchell, the woman who captured Damien Valenti's attention. Make them believe it." 2 hours later, Charlotte looked in the mirror and didn't recognize herself. The dress hugged her curves like a second skin. Her hair was swept up in an elegant chignon. The diamonds around her neck were cold against her skin. Damien stepped behind her, his dark suit contrasting with her green dress. He met her eyes in the reflection. For a second, he looked stunned. "Beautiful," he muttered, almost to himself. Then he cleared his throat. "Remember, stay close. Drink nothing unless I hand it to you. And trust no one." The gala was held at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. It was a sea of flashing cameras and forced smiles. Charlotte felt terrified, clutching Damien's arm. His bicep was hard as rock beneath the fabric. As they moved through the crowd, Damien played the part perfectly. Charming, dangerous, powerful. But Charlotte was working. She tuned out the music and focused on the whispers. She was standing near the champagne fountain when she heard a familiar voice. Stefano. He was talking to a man she didn't recognize, a short, balding man with nervous eyes. They were tucked away behind a large Egyptian statue. Charlotte drifted closer, pretending to admire the artifact. Tonight, Stefano was whispering. The timeline has moved up. He suspects. But the shipment isn't ready, the balding man hissed. It doesn't matter, we take him out tonight. On the way back. The bridge. Charlotte's blood turned to ice. The bridge. They were going to ambush the car on the way home. Are you sure the girl isn't a problem? The balding man asked. The maid. Stefano laughed softly. She's a distraction. A pretty toy. When Damien goes down, she'll be easy to dispose of. Or maybe I'll keep her. She has fire. Charlotte felt bile rise in her throat. She had to warn Damien. Now! She turned to find him, but a hand clamped onto her upper arm. Lost, my dear? It wasn't Damien. It was a tall, elegant woman with icy blonde hair. She was smiling, but her grip was painful. Charlotte recognized her from the tabloids. Irina Moretti, the daughter of the rival family. I'm looking for Damien, Charlotte stammered. Damien is busy discussing peace treaties with my father, Irina purred. Why don't you and I have a chat in the ladies' room? I'm dying to know how a hotel maid ended up wearing the Valenti emeralds. She pulled Charlotte towards the corridor. Charlotte scanned the room frantically. Damien was across the hall, surrounded by 3 men. He wasn't looking at her. Irina dragged her into the empty restroom. As soon as the door clicked shut, Irina's smile vanished. She pulled a small switchblade from her clutch. Now, Irina said, flicking the blade open, you're going to tell me exactly what Damien knows about the shipment, or I'm going to carve a smile onto that pretty face. Charlotte backed up against the sink. She was trapped. Stefano was planning to kill Damien outside. Irina was planning to kill her inside. She looked at the knife. Then she looked at the heavy marble soap dispenser on the counter. Charlotte Mitchell wasn't a fighter, but she had punched a Mafia don and lived. She took a deep breath. I don't know anything, Charlotte said, her voice shaking. Wrong answer, Irina lunged. Irina lunged, the silver blade flashing under the harsh bathroom lights. Charlotte didn't have time to think. She only had time to react. She grabbed the heavy marble soap dispenser from the counter and swung it with both hands. Crack! The marble connected with Irina's wrist. The knife clattered to the tiled floor. Irina shrieked, clutching her arm, her composure shattering instantly. You little rat! Irina hissed, kicking out with a stiletto heel that caught Charlotte in the shin. Charlotte gasped in pain, but didn't stop. She wasn't trying to win. She was trying to survive. While Irina was off balance, Charlotte shoved her hard against the stall doors. Irina slipped on the wet floor and went down in a heap of silk and cursing. Charlotte didn't wait. She scrambled for the door, threw it open, and burst back into the gala. The ballroom was a blur of music and laughter. Charlotte was panting, her hair coming loose, her shin throbbing. She scanned the crowd desperately. She had to find Damien. The bridge! They're going to hit him on the bridge. She spotted him near the exit, putting on his coat. Stefano was standing right next to him, smiling, clapping Damien on the shoulder. They were leaving. Damien! Charlotte screamed, forgetting the rules, forgetting the image. The music didn't stop, but the heads near her turned. Damien froze. He turned to see Charlotte running toward him, looking disheveled and frantic. Bruno stepped in her path, his hand going to his holster. Miss Mitchell? What happened? Move! Charlotte shoved past the surprised bodyguard and grabbed Damien's lapels. You can't take the car. You can't take the bridge. Damien frowned, gripping her arms to steady her. Charlotte, calm down. What is this? What happened to your hair? Irina Moretti, Charlotte gasped. She tried to kill me in the bathroom. I heard them, Damien. Stefano and a man. They're planning an ambush tonight. On the bridge. They're going to kill you. The silence that followed was deafening. Damien's eyes snapped to Stefano. Stefano didn't flinch. He didn't run. He just sighed, shaking his head with a look of pity. Oh, Charlotte, Stefano said softly. I told you she wasn't cut out for this life, Dom. She's cracking under the pressure. Paranoid delusions. It's not a delusion, Charlotte cried, pointing a trembling finger at him. He's the leak, Damien. He's working with the Morettis." "That is a serious accusation," Damien said, his voice dropping to absolute zero. He looked at his cousin. "Stefano?" Stefano reached into his pocket. Bruno tensed, ready to draw, but Stefano only pulled out a phone. Not his phone. A cheap burner flip phone. "I didn't want to do this here," Stefano said, looking apologetic. "I found this in her room earlier when I was checking security sweeps. I thought I'd handle it quietly, but—" He tossed the phone to Damien. Damien caught it. He flipped it open and scrolled through the texts. His face turned to stone. "Read the last one," Stefano said. Damien read aloud, his voice devoid of emotion. "Target is leaving at 10 p.m. Take the bridge route. I will distract him." Charlotte's blood ran cold. "No, that's not mine. I've never seen that phone before." "It was under your mattress," Stefano said smoothly. "Irina wasn't attacking you in the bathroom, was she? You were meeting her, negotiating your payout." "Liar!" Charlotte lunged at Stefano, but Bruno held her back. "Damien, look at me. I punched you to save your life. Why would I kill you now?" "To finish the job," Stefano countered. Or maybe the punch was just to get inside the house, to get close. Damien looked up from the phone. He looked at Charlotte. For weeks, she had seen heat in his eyes, curiosity, maybe even affection. Now there was nothing, just a black void. "You were the only one who knew my schedule tonight," Damien said quietly. "Damien, please," Charlotte sobbed. "The bridge," Damien repeated. "You warned me about the bridge to make yourself look innocent, knowing we'd find the phone eventually. It's a double bluff." "No!" Damien closed the phone and crushed it in his hand. He turned to Bruno. "Take her." "Boss?" Bruno asked, unsure. "Where?" "Get her out of my sight," Damien snarled. "Strip her of the jewelry. Take the dress. Leave her on the street where we found her. If she ever comes near me or my family again, kill her." "Damien!" Charlotte screamed as Bruno dragged her away. "He's going to kill you. Please listen to me." Damien didn't look back. He walked out the main doors, flanked by Stefano, who shot Charlotte one last triumphant smirk. Charlotte sat on the curb in Queens, shivering. It was 3 a.m. It was raining again. It was always raining in Charlotte's life. She was wearing an oversized mechanic's jumpsuit that Bruno had tossed at her after taking the emerald dress. Her feet were bare. She had lost her heels in the struggle. She had nothing. No phone, no money, no job. And worst of all, she had the crushing weight of failure. She had tried to save him, and he had looked at her like she was garbage. He believed him, she thought, wiping rain and tears from her face. He trusted his blood over me. She stood up on shaky legs. She had to get to the hospital. She had to warn the nurses that the payments might stop. She had to figure out how to move Toby before the Valentis came to finish them off. She walked for 40 blocks. By the time she reached St. Jude's, her feet were bleeding. She stumbled into the lobby, dripping wet. The night nurse looked up, horrified. "Miss Mitchell, my God, are you all right? My brother," Charlotte rasped. "Is he okay? Did anyone call to cancel his room?" The nurse frowned, typing into the computer. "Cancel? No, actually the account was updated an hour ago." Charlotte stopped breathing. "Updated?" "Yes, a private endowment was set up in Toby Mitchell's name. Paid in full for the next 5 years, including rehabilitation and college tuition." The nurse looked at Charlotte with wide eyes. "Miss Mitchell, you don't have to worry about the bill ever again." Charlotte grabbed the counter for support. The world tilted. 5 years? Paid an hour ago? That was after Damien threw her out. After he accused her of being a traitor. Why would he pay for her brother's life if he thought she tried to kill him? Unless he didn't think that. The realization hit her like a physical blow. The coldness in his eyes, the public scene, the way he let Stefano do all the talking, but crushed the phone so no one else could examine it. He knew. He knew Stefano was the traitor, but he couldn't prove it yet. and as long as Charlotte was at the mansion, she was a target. Stefano would have killed her that night to silence her. By throwing her out, by making it look like he hated her, Damien had removed the target from her back. He had saved her life the only way he could, by breaking her heart. "He knows," Charlotte whispered. "He's going to war." "Miss Mitchell?" the nurse asked. "I need a phone," Charlotte said, her voice hardening. "I need to call him. He's walking into a trap. I can't let you use the desk phone for—" "Give me the damn phone!" Charlotte yelled, startling the lobby security. She grabbed the receiver. She didn't know Damien's personal number, but she knew the emergency line for the estate. She dialed with trembling fingers. Ring, ring, ring. "Valenti residence," Mrs. Caldwell's voice answered. "Caldwell, it's Charlotte. Don't hang up. Is Damien there?" "Charlotte?" The housekeeper sounded shaken. "You shouldn't be calling. The house is on lockdown." "Where is he?" "He didn't come home," Caldwell whispered. "There was an incident on the bridge. The car was hit." Charlotte felt the receiver slip in her sweat-slicked hand. "Is he—" "We don't know. The police found the car burning, but no body. Stefano is here. He's taking control of the family. He says Damien is dead." "He's not dead," Charlotte said, a fierce certainty burning in her chest. Damien Valenti didn't die in a car crash, not the man who survived poison and a punch to the gut. Stefano tried to kill him, but he missed. "Charlotte, you need to hide," Caldwell warned. "Stefano is sending cleanup crews. He's looking for loose ends." "Let him look," Charlotte said. She hung up. She turned to leave, but two men were blocking the hospital exit. They weren't Valenti men. They wore leather jackets and had tattoos on their necks. One of them had a scar running through his eyebrow. Moretti soldiers. Charlotte backed up, but she bumped into a hard chest. She turned around. A third man was behind her. "Going somewhere, Principessa?" The man behind her sneered. "Leave me alone," Charlotte said, raising her fists. "The boss wants a word," the scarred man said. "He heard you were the one who tipped off Valenti about the bridge. Shame you were too late." "Who?" Charlotte demanded. "Stefano." "No," the man laughed. "Don Moretti. He wants to know what secrets you whispered to Valenti before he went up in smoke." They grabbed her. Charlotte fought. She kicked, she bit, she screamed for the security guard, who was currently looking the other way, terrified. A black bag was shoved over her head. The world went dark. As they dragged her out into the rain, Charlotte didn't panic. Her fear had burned away in the realization of what Damien had done for her. He had paid for Toby. He had tried to save her. Now it was her turn. She was going into the heart of the enemy territory, and she wasn't going to be the maid who scrubbed floors anymore. She was the woman Damien Valenti loved, and she was going to burn the Moretti family to the ground to find him. The warehouse in the Bronx smelled of stale cigar smoke and rusted iron. Charlotte was tied to a wooden chair in the center of a wide, empty floor. Her lip was split, and her mechanic's jumpsuit was torn at the shoulder, but she sat with her chin high. Don Moretti, a heavy-set man with a face like a bulldog, paced in front of her. Irina stood nearby, her arm bandaged where Charlotte had smashed it with the soap dispenser. "You have spirit. I'll give you that," Moretti grunted. "But my patience is wearing thin. Valenti is dead. His car is a pile of ash on the Triborough Bridge. You are protecting a ghost." "If he's dead," Charlotte said, her voice raspy but steady, "then why are you afraid? Why kidnap a maid if the king is already gone?" Irina stepped forward and slapped Charlotte across the face. "Shut up. You're here because you know where Damien kept the ledger, the black book. Stefano says you were the only one allowed in the study." Charlotte tasted blood. She smiled. "Stefano is a fool. He thinks he can run the city. He couldn't even run a lemonade stand without stealing from the jar." "Stefano is our partner now," Moretti sneered. "With Damien gone, we divide the territory. But first, I want the access codes to the offshore accounts. Stefano says Damien changed them last week. He thinks you saw the new ones." "I don't know any codes," Charlotte said. "Then you are useless," Moretti shrugged. He pulled a heavy revolver from his waistband. "Irina, you wanted the honors?" Irina's eyes lit up. She took the gun, weighing it in her good hand. She aimed it squarely at Charlotte's chest. "This is for my wrist," Irina hissed. Charlotte closed her eyes. She didn't pray. She just thought of Damien, the way he looked in the tuxedo, the way he had secretly paid for Toby's life before throwing her out. "I tried," she thought. "I'm sorry." Click. The lights in the warehouse cut out. Total darkness. "What is that?" Irina screamed. "Dad!" "Stay calm," Moretti shouted. "It's a fuse. Joey, check the breaker." Silence. "Joey?" Thud. The sound of a heavy body hitting the concrete echoed through the dark. Then came the sound of footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. The sound of expensive leather shoes walking on grit. Step, step, step. "Who's there?" Moretti's voice wavered. "Show yourself." A red flare crackled to life in the darkness. It illuminated a figure standing 10 feet away. He was wearing a tactical vest over a torn tuxedo shirt. His face was streaked with soot and blood. He held the flare in one hand and a suppressed pistol in the other. It was Damien Valenti, and he looked like the devil himself. "You," Moretti breathed, stepping back. "We saw the fire. You died." "I listened to my maid," Damien said, his voice a low growl that vibrated in Charlotte's chest. "I didn't take the bridge. I sent the empty car. Remote control is a wonderful thing." He dropped the flare. As it hit the floor, the shadows lengthened, dancing like demons. "Kill him!" Irina shrieked, firing the revolver blindly. Bang! Bang! Damien moved with terrifying speed. He didn't run. He flowed. He ducked under the wild shots, closing the distance. He disarmed Irina with a brutal chop to her injured wrist, sending the gun skittering away. She collapsed, screaming. Moretti fumbled for a backup weapon, but Damien was already there. He kicked Moretti's knee, shattering it, and pressed the muzzle of his silencer against the Don's forehead. "You touched her," Damien whispered. It wasn't a question. It was a death sentence. "Stefano!" Moretti blubbered, hands raised. "It was Stefano! He sold you out! He wanted the throne! I know," Damien said coldly. "And tell the devil I sent you." Foot, Moretti slumped to the ground. Silence returned to the warehouse, broken only by Irina's sobbing in the corner. Damien ignored her. He turned to Charlotte. He holstered his weapon and pulled a knife. Charlotte flinched, but he only slashed the ropes binding her wrists and ankles. As soon as she was free, she tried to stand, but her legs gave out. Damien caught her. He pulled her against his chest, burying his face in her neck. He was shaking. "I thought I was too late," he murmured into her hair. "God, Charlotte, I thought I lost you." Charlotte wrapped her arms around him, smelling the smoke and the gunpowder. "You paid for Toby," she sobbed. "I went to the hospital. They told me." Damien pulled back, framing her face with his rough hands. "I had to make it look real. I had to make Stefano believe I hated you, so he wouldn't kill you immediately. It was the hardest thing I've ever done." "I knew," Charlotte said, wiping tears from his soot-stained cheek. "When I saw the payment, I knew you were going to war." "The war isn't over," Damien said, his eyes hardening. "There is one rat left in the trap." He picked Charlotte up in his arms, carrying her like a bride. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Home," Damien said, "to take back what is ours." The Valenti estate was quiet, too quiet. Stefano sat in Damien's leather chair in the library, his feet up on the desk. He was drinking Damien's scotch, the 30-year-old bottle. "To the king," Stefano toasted to the empty room. "Long may he rot." "That's my scotch, Stefano." Stefano dropped the glass. It didn't break. It bounced on the rug, spilling amber liquid everywhere. He spun around. Damien stood in the doorway. He hadn't changed. He was still covered in the filth of the night, looking like a revenant who had crawled out of a grave to seek vengeance. Beside him stood Charlotte. She looked battered, bruising blooming on her cheek, but she stood tall, her hand firmly in Damien's. "Dom," Stefano stammered, his face draining of color. The reports. The bridge." You really should have checked the body, Damien said, walking into the room. Bruno and 3 other loyal guards stepped out from the shadows of the hallway, blocking the exit. Stefano was trapped. It was Moretti, Stefano cried, backing up against the window. He forced me. He threatened to kill me. An liar, Charlotte said. Her voice cut through the air, sharp and clear. I heard you at the gala. You laughed about it. You called me a toy. You said you wanted the Empire because Damien was soft. Damien stopped in front of the desk. He picked up the fallen glass and set it upright. You're right, cousin, Damien said softly. I was soft. I let you live in my house. I let you eat my food. I let you think you were my equal. He looked at Charlotte. What is the punishment for treason? Charlotte looked at Stefano. She saw the man who had tormented her, who had tried to kill the man she loved, who had mocked her poverty. He wanted to be the boss, Charlotte said. Let him face the justice of a boss. Damien nodded. He turned to Bruno. Take him. Make sure he disappears. I never want to hear his name again. No, Dom, we're blood, Stefano screamed as Bruno dragged him out. My blood is right here, Damien said, squeezing Charlotte's hand. As the screams faded, the room fell silent. The adrenaline of the night began to fade, replaced by a bone-deep exhaustion. Damien turned to Charlotte. He looked at her bruised face, her torn clothes, her messy hair, and he smiled. It was a real smile, warm, open, and full of love. You realize, Damien said, that you've lost your job. Charlotte blinked. Excuse me? I can't have a maid who knows where the bodies are buried. It's against protocol. Charlotte crossed her arms, feigning annoyance. So I'm unemployed again, after I helped you take down the Moretti crime family. Not unemployed, Damien said. He reached into his pocket. For a second, Charlotte thought he was going to pull out another phone. Instead, he pulled out a ring. It wasn't a diamond the size of a skating rink. It was a simple, elegant band of platinum set with a single, rare emerald, the same color as the dress she had worn to the gala. I picked this out the day after you punched me, Damien confessed. I kept it in my pocket, thinking I was crazy. A Valenti doesn't marry the help. It's forbidden. He got down on one knee, right there on the rug where he had once almost died. But you aren't the help, Charlotte. You saved my life when my own kin tried to end it. You fought for me when I pushed you away. You are the only person in this world I trust. Charlotte's hands flew to her mouth. Tears pricked her eyes again, but these were happy tears. Charlotte Mitchell, Damien asked, looking up at her with those intense, dark eyes. Will you do me the honor of running this insane asylum with me? Will you be my wife? Charlotte laughed, a wet, choked sound. Only if you promise to chew your food properly. I'm not punching you in the stomach again. Deal, Damien grinned. Yes, she whispered. Yes, Damien. He slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. He stood up and kissed her, a kiss that tasted of scotch, survival, and forever. 3 years later. The headlines had changed. The Valenti family was still powerful, but the nature of their power had shifted. The docks were clean, the unions were legitimate, and the Valenti Foundation, spearheaded by Charlotte Valenti, was the largest donor to hospitals and orphanages in the state. Toby was in college now, studying engineering. He came over for Sunday dinners, where he still teased Damien about being terrified of Charlotte. And he wasn't wrong. In the grand kitchen of the estate, Damien Valenti, the man who made grown men tremble, was currently chopping carrots. Thinner, Charlotte commanded, sitting on the counter with a glass of wine, watching him. I am a crime lord, Charlotte, Damien grumbled, though there was no heat in it. I am not a sous chef. You are a crime lord who wants his lasagna to taste good, she countered, leaning over to kiss his cheek. Now chop, nah. Damien sighed, but he smiled. He looked at his wife, the poor maid who had walked into suite 604 and punched him into a new life. He had expected to die that day. Instead, he had found the only thing worth living for. He went back to chopping. After all, the Queen had spoken. And that is the incredible true story of Charlotte Mitchell and Damien Valenti. It started with a mistake, a blocked airway, and a desperate punch that should have signed her death warrant. Instead, it signed her marriage license. They say love finds you in the strangest places, but for Charlotte, it found her on the floor of the presidential suite, fighting to save the life of a monster who turned out to be her soulmate. Today, the Valenti name stands for something different in New York, all because one brave woman refused to be invisible. What would you have done if you walked into that room? Would you have run, or would you have thrown the punch? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of danger, betrayal, and romance, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. Subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a twisted tale. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.